Hello, everyone. My name is Mackenzie Hart. I use they, them pronouns, and I am PFLAG National's Learning and Inclusion Coordinator. And I'm super happy to welcome you all to this week's episode of Something to Talk About Live. As always, I'm going to introduce our Director of Learning and Inclusion, Jean Marie Nevada.
Hey, Mackenzie, how's it going?
Great, thanks. How are you, Jean Marie?
I am doing well. Because of today's topic, I brought many glasses with me because I'm not allowed to drink on the air. So I have one of my favorite beer glasses here, which I hope is a nice prop.
I think it's a great prop. I think that you should drink beer, but probably not in the middle of the workday for you.
Probably not in the middle of the workday, and definitely not before I do a live broadcast.
Awesome. Well, have a great show. I am going to take myself out.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Hey, everybody, it's getting hard to take myself seriously anymore. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. I'm the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National. My pronouns are she and her, or ella if you use Spanish. And every single week for, I think, the past 150 weeks, we've gotten together to talk about something related to LGBTQ equality. And today, we're talking about beer because today is New Year's Eve. Tomorrow is National Beer Day. And so National Beer Day is celebrated on April 7th every year to recognize the passage of the Cullen-Harrison Act, which eventually led to the passage of the 21st Amendment. This is the beginning of where we see queer bars to become a really, really critical part of LGBTQ history. Since that time, we've seen more than 50 beer brands actively and very openly demonstrate their allyship to the LGBTQ community. And it's interesting that we're doing the story this week, given that Bud Light has made a whole lot of news with their work with Dylan Mulvaney, to which I say, everyone go have a Bud Light too. So for those of you who are following the articles with us, we have a really, really fascinating article for you that Jamie found from Good Beer Hunting. Damian Kerlin wrote, it's called Gay Men Drink Craft Beer Too, on lad culture, stereotypes, and beer's cultural barriers. So this actually is a very serious conversation. And to do it, we have two fantastic guests. So in just a moment, we are going to bring in Eric Scheiner, who is the digital product owner at Southern Glazer Wine and Spirits, and my colleague and other half, Jamie Henkel of PFLAG's Learning and Inclusion team. Hello, Eric, and hello, Jamie.
Hey, Jamie. Hey,
hello. It is so good to have the two of you together for this one. And I'm really excited about this show, especially because when Jamie originally suggested it, I sort of did the head tilts and looked at her like, where are we going with this? And the more we talked about it, the more there was so much to talk about that I got really excited about it. So before we really get into the conversation, I just want to give people an idea of where you are coming from. So Eric, besides Jamie called me, could you tell people a little bit about your role and what brought you into this conversation?
Absolutely. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for inviting me, first and foremost. I really appreciate it. So right now, I'm a product owner at Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits, which allows me the opportunity to work on collaborative technology within the organization and our supplier partners. And I've spent a lot of the last 9 years with Southern Glazers focusing on various LGBTQIA+ initiatives in ways to help our employees become, well, who they want to be and allow them the freedom and openness to live life as they are within the company, with our customers, and with our suppliers.
Thank you. And you've been such a great partner with PFLAG. We've done some fun work together, and I so appreciate this and the conversations that you're getting started. And Jamie, I mean, people know you because you've been with us on the show before, but give us context for this conversation.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. Jamie Henkel, she and her, and I'm the Learning and Inclusion Manager at PFLAG. I've been with the Straight for Equality program specifically for about 12 years. So I've worked with a lot of different brands and companies through that work. But in the context of today's conversation, I'm just a person that likes beer. I like drinking beer. I like trying new beers. I like collecting beer. I like going to local breweries. I have actually experimented with home brewing. Like, I just like beer. So that's why I think I was invited to be a part of today's conversation. Lastly, I am one of those 8 and 10 self-ID'd allies that actually makes purchasing decisions based on where companies stand on LGBTQ issues. So that consumer aspect, that is part of what I'm representing here.
I love that. And I also just need to say, if anyone's in Portland, you should definitely connect with Jamie because she will take you on like the perfect beer tour. She found a place that only served cider for me, and it was like the best afternoon we ever had. It was after work. I'll note that. So this article, which for those of you who haven't had a chance to read it, it's really a fascinating read. It kicks off by sort of starting a conversation about there seems to be a connection between what people drink and what we see other people drinking, and what we assume about their identities in terms of who they are and some of those personal characteristics. So I want to ask both of you, and whoever wants to jump in first on this one, I'd be happy to hear it. Was this anything you've ever been conscious of before, or was this something that you just started to consider as you read the article?
Take it away, Jamie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure I'd ever consciously thought about it, but as I did, I was like, I absolutely do make judgments and assumptions based on what I see people ordering. So I'll make assumptions about how old somebody is based on what they're drinking. I'll make assumptions about their personality and sort of what they might be interested in. I make assumptions about what their socioeconomic status is based on what they've ordered. I might even make assumptions on how often they drink based on whatever it is that's in their hand. And I can't necessarily think of a time where I saw what somebody was drinking and was like, oh, they must be LGBTQ plus. I can't think of that offhand, but it's possible that it's happened. And so it was really revelatory to me reading this article and being like, I do that sometimes.
Eric, anything to add to that?
Oh, 100%. And honestly, it's quite the opposite for me as the person who would be going to the bar, because I feel all of us that have been othered in some capacity are keenly aware of our presence and the space we occupy in public, whether that's a bar, an airplane, a train, a grocery store. And that's really only compounded in a very social atmosphere where alcohol is flowing and inhibitions are lowered. And we often think of ordering what's going to help us feel safe in a place where we otherwise may not. So it's definitely something we all think of, and something I believe people are thinking of more regularly when they go out now, because they either want to be perceived a certain way or they don't want to be perceived a certain way. So it really depends on, I think, how comfortable that individual is, where they're at in their journey, as well as where they are publicly, because you can be very comfortable with yourself, but that doesn't mean that people around you feel the same way.
You know, that's so interesting. You actually just said something that right away, it made me start thinking about how you want to be perceived and maybe how you don't want to be perceived. And so as somebody who is gay and female, I thought, wow, if I go into bars and order a beer, it's going to be like one giant stereotype for what you'd expect. And literally spent years of my life consciously not drinking what I wanted to drink because I was like, oh God, I just don't want to be that stereotype. So one more question for you, Eric. Is this a conversation that you at all hear in the context of the work that you're doing?
Oh, all the time. I mentioned earlier that I focus on collaborative technology. A lot of that's focused on trade promotion management, which a big focus of that is multicultural marketing. So these are campaigns that our brands and our suppliers are planning months in advance, spending very large sums of money to support. So this kind of targeted marketing towards the different identities and minorities are a major piece of today's branding puzzle for alcohol brands if they wish to be successful.
And I think we're starting to see it. It's becoming so much more visible now. So one of the first points that you see in the article that we shared this week is that there is an increasing awareness across the board, especially as we look at marketing, but even among individuals around who is portrayed drinking certain things. So there are kind of still these stereotypes that we dig into. So Jamie, I just dropped the J completely because we just met yesterday, obviously. I'm never going to hear the end of this one. As an ally who is using this, so using your ally lens, have you picked up on these stereotypes in beer? Because you said you're a huge fan of beer, so you've certainly been paying attention, and in alcohol in general. And do you think that many of these stereotypes are specific to the LGBTQ space, or do you see them in other types of marketing, whether it's race or it's about gender or something else?
My cat has decided to join the broadcast today. And, I think that Yes, until I saw it written down, I didn't put the pieces together, but there are absolutely stereotypes about who drinks what and how things are marketed to different people. So we see this whole culture around like hashtag wine mom, and for Father's Day, all of the lists are, get your dad's dark liquor and heavy beer. And I think that there are absolutely stereotypes about different drinks and how they're marketed and what kind of alcohol it is. And I mean, I think we can all imagine the beer that young kids who didn't have any money drank in our college town. Where I lived, we all drank PBR because it stood for the perfect beer for Richmond. So like there are these stereotypes. And if marketers aren't tapping into those things, they absolutely should be. Like they're doing themselves a disservice. But one of the other things that this article made me think about in a way that I never really had before is also how it's not just about these sort of visible, really salient parts of our identity. It's also about like the complexities of body image and diet culture, because we have beauty standards for women and for LGBTQ folks and for cisgender and heterosexual men that are different. And so when we think about those things, beer is perceived to be a very high calorie drink. There was a whole marketing campaign and sort of rush to be the low calorie beer. And I remember when that started and it happened and they were marketing beer to women and to people who were LGBTQ plus, and it was 64 calories. And this was this big selling point. So it all gets wrapped up into each other in a way that I think is really interesting.
I totally agree with you. I remember, I think it was when Skinny Girl came out. I just remember standing in a store and thinking, oh my goodness, you figured it all out now. And then I actually simultaneously felt really bad about the entire thing. So Eric, have you seen changes in how, especially beer manufacturers, are manufacturing and marketing these things? So do you think that they've A, become aware of the stereotypes, and B, that there is an effort that you are seeing to challenge some of these stereotypes?
Yes to both. I think they are very well aware of their stereotypes. You see alcohol brands, both beer and spirits, adamantly trying day in and day out to shed negative images or promote positive ones regarding the stereotypes surrounding their beverage. But what I've really noticed are a lot of these independent, smaller breweries that are really kind of leading that charge towards inclusivity in the local community. There's this large appetite by brewers and manufacturers to kind of step away from that idea of traditional mask and femme marketing. As it's rather alienating to those of us who could be converted to repeat customers otherwise. You see that active effort also by the big beer companies and also the smaller ones to really kind of spread that love and joy of the brew, their passion for it. Really break away from those negative stereotypes in these newer marketing campaigns. You mentioned Bud Light earlier with Dylan Mulvaney, and look how popular that is and the conversation it's now starting. And by doing so, let's put dollars and cents on the line. You could be tapping into billion-dollar plus market segments while also promoting a positive brand image and converting customers from a one-time drinker to a repeat drinker. And that's what they need. They don't need someone to come in and buy it once. They need you to keep buying it.
Yeah. Yeah. And they really are figuring out ways to make that more attractive. So the article that we shared this week addresses lad culture, which is definitely a very British framing for, I think, what in the US we would refer to as bro culture. And it is typically associated with hypermasculinity. And unfortunately, often with that comes anti-LGBTQ attitudes. So Jamie, and that is Jamie, not Amy, as an ally, do you still see signs of lad culture going on here, even in progressive places like where you live? And do you think there are anything that people can do, sort of everyday stuff that you can do to minimize it?
Yeah. And I mean, I think infinity%, I do see this sort of bro or lad culture permeating craft beer culture, especially. And I think that there's a lot of gatekeeping that happens in those spaces, that when you are somebody who doesn't fit the stereotype of who should be interested and invested in craft beer culture, there is a lot of like, I'm somebody, I really like sour beers and I like fruit beers and I like ciders, and I get smirks and eye rolls and sort of side eye because a lot of people assume if you don't like IPAs and stouts that you're not really into beer. You're not really into the craft beer scene. I'm also somebody, I was in a social club about 10 years ago where a group of people once a month would get together. We'd all bring a large format beer and we'd share it. We'd share something we hadn't tried before. I was the only woman who regularly attended. And so there is absolutely like gatekeeping and this expectation that beer culture is going to be a space for men and for masculine, potentially straight, most likely cisgender men. And when I think about what we can do about that, I've got to be honest. I think that there's not a ton we can do to minimize it. I mean, it is so permeated. It has permeated the culture so much, and somehow it's getting worse because of social media. But what I am going to commit to doing is showing up, because a while back, I sort of convinced myself that my interest in beer was really my ex-partner's interest in beer, and that I couldn't really like it as much as I did because I am a girl, because I don't fit the stereotype of who should be interested in it. And so I'm going to show up, and I'm not going to care about how people perceive what I'm drinking. I'm not going to make those assumptions that I highlighted about other people when I see what they're drinking. And if I see somebody who's making fun of somebody or sort of commenting on what they've ordered, I'm going to shut it down because it's not okay.
And I love that. And I love the fact that, you have to acknowledge changing an entire culture is really hard, but you can control those tiny little moments that are in your control. And that's how you respond at these sections, where these things are happening. So interestingly, beyond the fact that it's a fun topic for us to talk about, beer does have a really long and incredibly historic place in LGBTQ activism. Harvey Milk led the famous Coors boycott in 1973, which both galvanized support for unions and put pressure on Coors at the time to really improve their employment practices. So the article that we shared today actually mentioned some of the criticism that some beer companies have received recently, especially around the World Cup, which raised the issue of criminalization of LGBTQ lives. The World Cup was supported by a lot of companies that also do a whole lot of marketing to LGBTQ people, and it got us going on that conversation about rainbow washing again. So, Eric, this article definitely does focus kind of on the negative aspects of this, but there are a lot of visible examples. And I mean, we've mentioned Dylan Mulvaney because it's sort of literally on the CNN homepage right now. There are lots of positive examples of where beer companies, and I would even broaden this to alcohol companies as a whole, have become very important, very visible, and very actively and vocally supportive of the LGBTQ community. Can you talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you've seen? What has this evolution looked like? And what do you think it means for some of the distributors like your organization?
Absolutely. I've really noticed a strong push towards inclusivity and community support from many, many alcohol brands over the years. And I've been fortunate to be working in F&B for the last 15 years since I started in college. So we'll pretend that makes me very old and very seasoned. But what used to be things as simple as just a label change or rainbow tchotchkes, like headbands and whatnot to pass out at bars, has really become increasingly about actual community support and investment. The average commuters, but consumers as well, the average consumers, they don't really see what these brands do behind the scenes to support the queer community, which can range from financial sponsorship to local pride parades, pride events, product donations, staff support, fundraising events, marketing support. So that all goes under the radar. But that positive impact far outweighs the negatives that can be associated with rainbow washing, especially considering the context for local communities that support those most in need and frankly rely on beverage alcohol to not only support their businesses and their families, but help uplift their communities as a whole. So as a distributor of these brands, we are instrumental in bringing those ideas to life with our supplier partners, working hand in hand, boots on the ground at the different events, at the on-premise bars, restaurants, off-premise liquor stores, to execute these campaigns in the community, expand the reach of the product, and hopefully develop a lifelong commitment from these companies to continue to support our local underserved communities in perpetuity.
And I have to just say, it really works. And I think there is a lot of, I hate using this word, but there legitimately is some synergy around this, because we actually, we do work with Deep Eddy Vodka, and I was doing some training with them, and they saw that we were working with your organization, and they got so excited to see that this connection was happening. And it was one of these moments where I thought the world is getting smaller, but in a good way.
Yes.
Because these connections are happening. It made me really excited to see.
It's a lot of fun at the end of the day, right? Because we're selling alcohol. About life. And to be able to do that in a very positive way with our supplier partners, it makes me very proud to represent these brands when I go out. And as a representative of Southern Glazers, I can be proud to order these brands when I'm out in public, because I know they're supporting me on the ground level. They're not rainbow washing it and saying one thing, but financially supporting something else.
It legitimately is an exciting time to look at this, especially because I think in many cases we would not assume that this change is happening. I actually want to jump around in the focus, because there's one question I wanted to make sure I got to from both of you, which was the article actually noted that in the UK, a number of pubs have started flying the rainbow flag, the pride flag, outside of their locations year round, not just in June. And so the article said that some places think this could actually be a deterrent to sort of obnoxious people and people who they don't want in the bar coming in, because they might not go into a place that has the rainbow flag. But I'm kind of curious about how you both feel about this. And maybe, Jamie, we could start with you, because we talk about that flag a lot. And Eric, I'd love to hear what your perspective is on it too.
Yeah, it was really strange reading that in the article, that there were some bars that weren't explicitly queer spaces that were starting to hang the flag to deter sort of a bad element from showing up at their bar. And it was very strange, but it also gave some context to why a dive bar in my neighborhood that is decidedly not a queer bar maybe recently started flying the Progress Pride flag on the side of their building. And I was like, maybe that's why. And it's sort of, on one hand, if it makes people feel safer, better, more included, like they are welcome in that space, that's amazing. And I want that to happen. But on the other hand, if these places aren't also doing the work to make sure people actually are safe and don't just feel safe, then it's complicated, because I want them to do the work, not just fly the flag.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. As you were saying it, I was like, it could be a sign of support, or it could just be that you live in Portland, Jamie, which also could be it too. Eric, what's your take on this, the use of the flag in this way?
Honestly, I'm going to fully support it. And I say that because while the intention may not be to actually be a safe space or a safe haven for queer people initially, and I think that's the key word, is initially, it does indicate some level of willingness to grow and learn with your patrons and the people you are serving in the community. And frankly, as a gay man in my community, I am very consciously aware of which businesses visibly display support for my community, those who do not, and frankly, those who put their money where their mouth is. And that's very important. I want my money to go support those who support me. And I think the road to inclusion is always going to be more profitable than that of exclusion, frankly. So if it's that one small step to kind of just open that door and start that conversation about making it an intentional safe space to, like Jamie said, actually protect the community, not just have some performative display, then so be it. I will happily be there to stand on my step stool and shout from the rooftops. So I'm going to be there.
Or sit on your bar stool, as the
Or
case
sit on
might
my
be.
bar stool and over a nice tequila tell you why you should support the queer community.
I think there need to be more conversations staged exactly like that. All right, so I'm watching the clock. Mackenzie's letting me know we're getting close to time. So I do need to do a couple of fun questions. I'm going to hold my beer glass while I do this. I have two of them. It's true. And I will admit I had to borrow both from my wife. So a couple of fun questions for everybody. I'll do Jamie and then Eric. What is your favorite beer?
Right now, I'm going to say Dogfish Head's Festina Peach, which is going to hit the shelves here pretty soon because summer is coming.
Eric.
Oh, I'm a Belgian sour all the way. I thought it was serendipitous that Jamie mentioned that earlier because everyone looks at me like I have three heads when I say a Belgian sour.
Yeah.
Seriously, if you want to talk sour beer, she is your girl. Like she has been drinking it as long as I think I've known her. Jamie, one beer somebody should try.
So I'm gonna chicken out of this one, and instead of giving one beer, I'm just gonna suggest drink local. Go to that place that has just opened, that's making beer locally, that's brewing it in your community, because I think that cannot be done enough.
Eric, something people should try.
Jamie stealing my answers once again. But on the other hand, it's not just local beers here. It's the local beer of whatever culture you're visiting or country you're in. You know, when I travel, I don't want what I can get back at home. Show me what the locals drink. That's what I want to try. I want to eat and drink like a local. So
I love that answer. And so then I have to jump in and I have to say, if you're in London, go to Camden and try Camden Town Brewery. Hell's Lager is so yummy. It is like one of the best experiences that you'll have. Finally, I want to know from both of you, Jamie and from Eric, what is one beer or alcohol company that's doing great LGBTQ marketing that people should check out?
So I'm going to have to give a shout out to Miller Lite. Their Pride campaign from 2021, they worked with the gay historian Eric Cervini, who's been on our show a couple of times, to actually write a coffee table book called Beers and Queer History. And it was game changing for me. It was so cool. It was one of those things that was like, no, you are interested in beer. It just wasn't his hobby. And I'm still thinking about it 2 years later. I have it on my coffee table. Like I can't say enough good things about it.
Eric, you get the last word in this one.
Oh boy, my favorite. Well, I can't stick to just one because I only represent, some 15,000 schemes or so. But if I had to name some that really stand out and mean a lot to me and the community, I would have to start with the McBride sisters and their She Can campaigns, House Wine and their support of the Trevor Project. But I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention Absolute and their decades-long Pride campaigns. And last but not least, near and dear to my heart, Bacardi USA, as someone who works with the National LGBTQ Task Force on their annual gala and the Winter Party Festival, Bacardi has been there year after year after year with product support, financial support, staff support. And even if it's not as visible to the average person, it means a lot to those of us who work in the industry and rely on that support to help engage with the community on a deeper level.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad you mentioned Absolute. They have been at this such a long time. The Absolute Pride campaign has been around forever, before anyone else was really public on this. Jamie, Eric, thank you for making one of the most fun shows I think that we have ever done. I so appreciate both of you. And Jamie, thank you for the idea. And Eric, thank you for coming here and sharing all of this stuff. I think we're going to have to do a sequel. So I just say cheers.
I'll be there.
Bye,
Cheers.
my friends.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up another episode. We have another great show for you coming next week. As always, make sure that you are checking out the resources at pflag.org. Read today's article that we used. It's super fascinating read. We remind you the same way every single show that we wrap up to do three things. To first of all, run fast, laugh hard, and most of all, please be kind. We will see you again next week on Something to Talk About Live. Bye, everyone.